past couple of years, I've been going back and forth on how we portray real-life serial killers in film and TV, and after watching Ryan Murphy's new monster series about Ed Gein, I think I have finally made up my mind. Halfway through the show, I caught myself feeling bad for Ed, and that, surprise surprise, really bothered me. The same thing, though, happened when I watched Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, and again when I saw teens and young adults dressing as Jeffrey Dahmer after the monster series came out. And since the start of this series, or rather dramatizations, I feel like it isn't about understanding the serial killer's psychology anymore. It feels more like these stories are asking me to sympathize with and even encourage pity on these people. That's when I realized what my problem was. And the bigger problem isn't just about one show or one movie. It's about how easily we consume real horror, how comfortable we've become with it, and how that comfort lets big companies keep turning someone's tragedy into entertainment. Hey everyone, I'm Nikanak, and I make videos about everything I question and overthink, and today we're talking about the line between creative liberty and exploitation, and why it's time to stop the Ryan Murphys of the world. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I'm used to this. I think, I write about provocative things and controversial things, and my motto is never complain and never explain.
Now, before I get into Ryan Murphy and his shows, I think it's worth looking at why we're all so obsessed with this stuff in the first place. Because it didn't start with Netflix, Hulu, HBO, etc., etc. Our fascination with real violence goes way, way back. In medieval Europe, executions were public events. People showed up like it was theater. They paid for the best view. Street vendors sold food and drinks. Some even wrote songs about the condemned. And the same thing happened with its predecessor in ancient Rome. Gladiator fights, animal hunts, public executions.
I mean, it has to be said that most societies show some propensity to enjoy violence. I mean, if you look at Hollywood movies now, or some computer games, I mean, they are pretty violent, albeit at one remove. And so partly I think the Romans do just show this kind of almost instinctive human interest in violence. But I think there's much more to it than that. What they're trying to do is really show that Rome has power of life and death over transgressors, outsiders, people who it has conquered. And in a way, that kind of violent execution is a way of the Romans coming together as a group, celebrating their Romanness and celebrating law and order.
But underneath all of this, it's the same thing we still crave today, the spectacle of violence. The difference now is access. You don't need to buy a ticket or stand in a crowd. You just open Netflix, scroll to the based on a true story section, and suddenly you're watching someone's worst day play out in front of you.
Exactly what has happened to their daughter is a mystery.
Because you'll never get caught.
Psychologists have been studying this for years. True crime TV shows and podcasts allow us to experience and exercise our fear of becoming a victim of crime in a safe, non-threatening, and even entertaining environment. And a lot of viewers, especially women, say the same thing. They don't just watch for entertainment, they watch to learn. One study found that many women tune in because they want to pick up on red flags, and a different study from the University of Derby explained the rush from a different perspective. Humans are wired to seek novelty. Whether it's good or bad, we chase that small jolt of adrenaline. Solving a mystery, trying to understand why someone did something horrific. It gives you that spark, but from a safe distance. So in short, it's fear we can control. You get the rush without the risk. And according to Edison research, it found that 84% of Americans over the age of 13 consume true crime in some form, through TV, podcasts, or streaming. Now, I just want to pause here for a second. 13. That's somebody in middle school. That's when most kids are still figuring out who they are, and they're already being exposed to real stories of murder and violence. Now, I'm not saying teenagers shouldn't know about the world, but when you see that kind of horror over and over again, it changes how you process it. It makes tragedy feel like something absolutely normal. On streaming platforms, it's the same story. Between 2018 and 2021, documentary series grew by over 60%. and demand for them jumped by more than 140%. We've turned real pain into something casual, something we put on while driving, cleaning, or falling asleep, and that's honestly unsettling. And now, just to be clear, I am not anti-true crime. I get the curiosity, and I get the good it can do when the justice system fails, and it does do that frequently. Sometimes people who cover this, be it news outlets, be it podcasts, be it even a documentary, brings attention to cases that deserve it. And there's also value in trying to understand what drives people to do terrible things. So my problem isn't the genre itself, it's simply how easily it turns into something we call comfort viewing. The more comfortable we get, the more creators can push it. They start polishing the tragedy they're talking about until it looks like entertainment. That comfort, that numbness, is what keeps this cycle alive. And once we got used to seeing horror every day, it was only a matter of time before someone figured out how to sell it back to us. Which brings me to Ryan Murphy. Now, Ryan Murphy has said that the guiding question of Monster is nature versus nurture. I think it's fascinating to write about this topic, which is essentially asking the question, are monsters made or are they born, he said. And honestly, I have to agree, that's a good question. The nature versus nurture debate has always been something that fascinated me, because the answer is truly never one-sided. It's both. People are shaped by their environment, their trauma, and their choices, and it's a topic that can reveal a lot about empathy, morality, and what separates a person from the unthinkable. But Murphy had a good question, and still managed to miss the point or didn't care at all. Now, there's a difference between exploring why someone becomes a killer and asking the audience to sympathize with them. The first season of Monster takes that question and turns it into a tragedy. Everything about how the show is filmed pushes the viewer to see Dahmer as broken rather than cruel.
But you don't have to have dinner with me every night, you know.
I don't mind.
The lighting is soft and shadowed. The pacing slow and moody.
Congratulations, Jeff. You're saved. Thanks.
And the soundtrack is mournful. And that is exactly where I turned it off, because it treats his pain like an explanation instead of holding him responsible. Murphy's visual style also leans on subjective framing and visual empathy. The camera stays close to Dahmer, centering his reaction and his emotions, while everyone else becomes background detail. And the victims exist around him, their fear, their lives, their families fade into the background. Even when we do see them, the focus cuts back to him, to his reaction, to his pain. That creative choice shapes how we feel. And after the show came out, victim Earl Lindsay's sister, Rita, said, Netflix should have asked if we mind or how we feel about making it. They didn't ask me anything. They just did it. Rita's cousin, Eric Perry, posted, my family is pissed. And yet, with all of this being said, Monster became one of the most watched shows in Netflix history, with nearly 500 million hours viewed in its first weeks and more than 1 billion within 2 months. And not long after, people started dressing up as Dahmer for Halloween. Some said it was because of Evan Peters, because he made the character cool. But is that really what we want to show? Is that really your goal, Ryan Murphy? That the takeaway from a story about 17 murders is a costume? And that even Dahmer's glasses went on an auction for $150,000? So what should have been a wake-up call got a second season. Monster, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. Now, the Menendez brothers' story was already tragic, was already complicated, but Ryan Murphy decided to turn their abuse and their crime into a scandalous subplot to make it sensational rather than meaningful. Now, what did he do? Well, the series added scenes that implied that the brothers had a romantic relationship with each other, something that, to our knowledge, never happened.
I devise and bequeath to my wife, Mary
Louise.
Author Robert Rand, who covered the original trial, called that idea a fantasy, and Eric Menendez released a statement calling the show's portrayal blatant lies. And when asked about the backlash, Ryan Murphy said his series has opened up the possibility that new evidence could offer a way forward for the brothers. He even called it the best thing that has happened to them in 30 years, saying it gave them another trial in the court of public opinion. Ryan Murphy presents his work as if it's doing the brothers a service, as if rehashing trauma on a global platform somehow helps the people living with its fallout. Sure, okay. And what makes it worse is that he never reached out to the brothers or the families. He said, "I have no interest in talking to them." Yet in the same breath, Murphy claims, "I believe in justice, but I don't believe in being a part of that machine. That's not my job. My job as an artist was to tell a perspective in a particular story. I feel I've done that, but I wish them well." And listen, I'm not trying to defend the Menendez brothers. I just don't understand why this version needed to exist. If the goal was to explore what makes a monster, wouldn't that mean talking to the two people at the center of it all and who are still alive, and you could have had that opportunity? And after that, Ryan Murphy could have changed things to the way he liked it, taken even his creative liberties. But real storytelling, I believe, means looking at every angle possible before drawing your own conclusions.
We are living our best lives. Okay.
And then finally, the creme de la creme of the monster series, the Ed Gein story. And out of all the monster installments, this one feels the most detached from reality. And I'll be honest with you, I actually really liked it, for reasons I wasn't supposed to like it for. The Hitchcock storyline and the Bitch of Buckenwald plotline were extremely interesting, and seeing those worlds collide visually was very creative in my opinion, and it truly reminded me of early American Horror Story. But the problem is, the show isn't called The Bitch of Buckenwald or Hitchcock's Monster, it's called the Ed Gein story, and by the end of the show, I realized I hadn't really learned much about him. We barely see his victims, we see him mourn, we see him spiral, we see the aesthetic of madness, but not the people who suffered because of it. Even his mother, who played one of the biggest roles in shaping who Ed became, is killed off almost immediately, while in reality, Augusta Gein's influence was enormous on Ed.
Ed Gein chose to kill women who resembled his mother because of the huge impact that she had on his life. The psychological trauma, the sexual trauma. I think all that really played into his need to kill other women and to sort of emulate her and become like her. And I think in the end, his fantasy was to become his mother. Thus, the skin.
So while yes, I did find parts of the show captivating, by the end, I really wasn't there for the Ed Gein story. And that's what I mean when I say the Ryan Murphys of the world miss the point. They make pain look beautiful, and that's how it loses its weight. The more polished it gets, the less it feels real, and the question isn't whether monsters are made or born anymore. It's how we keep turning them into entertainment. Now I know I've spent most of this video tearing into the Murphy formula, but I promise that I'm not just a grouch who complains about everything. I don't hate dramatizations. I do really love when stories inspire fiction because it's always so interesting to read about them. But there's a difference, once again, between interpreting something and romanticizing it. Take Psycho, for example. Hitchcock was inspired by Ed Gein too. Well, he was inspired by a novel that was loosely inspired by Ed, but he didn't try to tell Gein's story. He created Norman Bates, a fictional character who explored the psychology of repression, guilt, and obsession without turning real suffering into entertainment. Hitchcock himself said, "I was directing the viewers. You might say I was playing them like an organ." Instead of romanticizing violence or humanizing a killer, Psycho used fear as reflection, showing us how terror comes from within, not from the spectacle of someone else's pain.
I am sorry. I only felt... It seems she's hurting you. I meant well.
People always mean well. They cluck their thick tongues and shake their heads and suggest oh so very delicately. Of course, I've suggested it myself. But I hate to even think about it. She needs me. It's not as if she were a maniac. a raving thing. She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
Yes. Sometimes just one time can be enough.
And funny enough, I believe Ryan Murphy once knew how to do this himself. American Horror Story Murder House was written based off of real things that had happened. The Richard Speck nurse murders, the Black Dahlia case, even the haunting of the Rosenheim mansion. And if I'm remembering this correctly, even school shootings were part of that inspiration too. But it never pretended to be those stories. It mixed real crimes, urban legends, and supernatural myths to create something new. Murphy even said that the show's opening was inspired in part by Richard Speck. But more so, he said, in the writer's room, home invasion was by far the overwhelming thing we all collectively were most afraid of, and fear of someone breaking into your home, a place that's supposed to feel safe, is universal. It's not about glorifying a real murderer. It's about tapping into something everyone can relate to, vulnerability. That's what made, in my humble opinion, Murder House effective. And it's the same reason the movie by David Fincher, Zodiac, works. The focus of the movie shifts away from the killer and toward the people chasing the mystery, the detectives, the journalists, the ones who can't stop trying to understand what happened and how that obsession changes them. And while doing research for this video, I found what David Fincher said about this film, which I really liked. He said, "If I'm going to recreate murder scenes, I just want the facts. I'm not interested in prurience." He cites early film treatments of the same story, particularly Dirty Harry and its Scorpio killer. He says, "I remember going to see Dirty Harry when I was 12 or 13 years old and thinking, wait a minute, that's Zodiac. You can't just take people's suffering and turn it into a plot device. I didn't want to do that. My movie made the audience suffer." Fincher and Hitchcock knew that fear doesn't come from the violence, but from the weight it leaves behind and not making a spectacle out of it. Or, for example, take Mindhunter, also by David Fincher. It studies the psychology of serial killers without excusing them. Or When They See Us, which dramatizes real events but also handles them with care. And that, my friends, is storytelling that understands responsibility. At this point, it's not just about Ryan Murphy. He's one name in a much bigger system. The real issue is the industry that figured out how to package, market, and make pain trend. And these range from the Tinder swindler to Dahmer to the girl in the picture, each one framed as a deeper look into human nature, but all using the same formula. Real tragedy, high production value, and that based on a true story stamp to draw us in. And that's what makes this business model so effective. Controversy sells, where outrage and backlash become part of the marketing loop. Every tweet, every think piece, every family statement, hell, even this video will fuel the algorithm. It doesn't matter if people are angry or the victim's family members or even victims themselves are hurt. What matters is that we are watching. But what's even worse, and what made me truly despise this industry, is that the people most affected by these stories have no control over them. In the United States, streaming services don't need permission from victims' families to dramatize public crimes. Legal Cheek said, "Laws regarding privacy protection could be enhanced through measures such as required consent from victims and their families prior to dramatizations or reenactments. But those measures don't exist. The result is that families like Rita Isbell's can watch their trauma recreated on screen without warning or any kind of involvement. And every time we watch, share, or debate it, the system learns to feed us more. So where do we draw the line? I'm not saying people should stop making these stories. I'm saying we need to stop pretending that empathy is the goal when it's really just the hook. When Hitchcock made Psycho, he built a story out of fear and repression. When Ryan Murphy made Monster, he built fiction out of real grief. So once again, and I really do hope that people hear me, that I'm not here to cancel true crime. I'm just here to ask for better. But what about you? Did you watch the Monster series? Where do you draw the line with this stuff? And also, this is just a thought I had right now, but do you think we have a creativity issue if this is what we resort to? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. And now remember, the important thing is to always keep questioning. Even me. Till next time.